Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sean Bailey. My business is called Sean Bailey Wellness, which is essentially a wellness consultancy, which is based from years of coaching elite sport, lots of work within the sleep space, essentially a holistic approach to health. So I had the view that I was training athletes for Paralympics and all sorts of competition, and I had the view that there was a place for how an athlete prepares to be brought to the mainstream. And as part of that approach, I created Sean Bailey Wellness. So that was where the angle came from. As well as the session that we're doing today, I do a lot of stuff with mental health first aid, a lot of sleep clinics, lots of stuff around health coaching, personal training, and that sort of thing. So ideally, I like to take this to the corporate space. I deliver a lot of public courses where anyone can get involved, and we'll be hopefully launching some of them next week. But yeah, this session today is essentially a focus around 4 key areas of well-being that I guess within isolation that we can do something about immediately. And my experience from isolation is I've got quite a profound experience of isolation where in 2005 I broke my neck and I was paralysed, and I was in a bed actually for 3 months, and as part of that process of recovery, it was essentially I had to manage physical activity, hydration, sleep, and what I ate to enable the recovery that I've got or had. So that's why we're going to talk about the 4 areas that we talk about, the 4 pillars of health that I consider very key pillars. So that's where I'm coming from. I've got quite profound experience in isolation. It could also be reframed as wellbeing awareness for remote workers, but at the moment we're sort of tagging it as isolation. So we'll get going. Let's say any questions, just give us just type in the taskbar. I'm just going to adjust my controls 1 second. So the objective of the session today is essentially to highlight 4 key areas of our well-being that we can control and improve every single day. If we can control them, those 4 areas, with really simple things, it will really impact our physical and mental state for the better. And what we talk about, the tips that I'll give you and some of the hints that I'll provide, the benefits can be realised very quickly. Every intervention is completely harmless. This isn't replacing medical advice. It's just things that you can be doing to tailor what you're doing already. So 4 key areas that we will cover are sleep, hydration, nutrition, and activity. Now sleep, I'll just do a little touch point on each area here before we get into the details. Sleep, in my personal opinion, is the most underrated factor in the health space. It's starting to get a bit of traction now and a bit of momentum regarding how important it is, but it's still completely underappreciated. Sleep contributes to our physical health and our mental health, and unless there's a real underlying issue such as insomnia, sleep onset insomnia or sleep maintenance insomnia, the benefits from sleep or from improved sleep can be realised almost immediately. So we'll get some good tips in the sleep area. Hydration, we'll get into hydration because I cover hydration because when I was coaching sport, hydration was a critical area for every single athlete that I work with. You'd always be carrying a certain type of drink, whether it was filled with salts or sugars or some type of rehydration process or material that would be in their drink, and they would be consuming it at all parts of their training. Just let this one last person. Nutrition, I guess, something that I always say is for those that can remember 4-star fuel, you wouldn't put 4-star in a Ferrari. Now, food is our fuel, so we don't want to put poor nutrition in our bodies. And at the moment, we need to be doing everything we can to essentially prevent any type of bacterial infection or infection with the COVID situation. So nutrition, especially when we're in remote working, can be one of those things that can be easily forgotten about. We can quickly go to the cupboard and get into the biscuits or something like that. And so it's really important that we focus on that. And then activity is the last, certainly but not least, thing that we'll cover. Within isolation, without a shadow of a doubt, our activity levels have dropped. Gyms are short, sport is cancelled, so it's imperative that we really focus on our activity levels. And we'll give you some tips around our activity that we can do in a very small space. You don't need any equipment, and that can really start to keep our activity levels maintained, and in some cases start to improve it. And as I said, throughout all 4 areas and throughout the discussion, we'll give you realistic tips that you can apply with immediate effect without any equipment during this isolation period or remote working. So let's get into sleep. So the recommended sleep time for an average adult is 7 to 9 hours. And the reason it's 7 to 9 hours, anything below 7 hours, you can, if you were undergoing a psychomotor vigilance test, you would start to see cognitive impairment following less than 7 hours sleep. So that's why we get that 7 hours is 7 to 9 is the golden number. You can see physiological, I guess, poor performance physiologically when we start to get below 7 hours. So that's why we look at 7 to 9. Athletes such as Roger Federer, LeBron James build sleep into their training, and the longevity of specifically those 2 guys, Federer and LeBron James, is quite incredible. Roger Federer, 38, 39, still playing top level tennis. LeBron James, again, 36, still one of the best players in the NBA. And there's another little thing about sleep regarding importance and how we used to utilize it in sport is Usain Bolt was asleep, I think it was 30 minutes before his 200 meters Beijing world record. So if athletes at that level can really understand and appreciate the power and the importance of sleep, then I don't see how it's not relevant for every single person walking the earth that wants to optimize their health. So why, I always get asked this question, why should I improve sleep and what does it do? So I'll give you 3 quick things that will, why we need to improve sleep. So firstly, sleep will improve or maintain our mental health. So for those that don't know, a little bit of detail into sleep. There's 2 types of sleep: REM, rapid eye movement, which you've probably all heard of, and there's non-REM, which is we call it NREM, which is essentially the deep sleep that we go through when we're not dreaming. And as part of REM sleep, one of the key theories around dreaming within the sleep space is that dreams are almost related to emotional first aid. So when we start seeing insufficient sleep, what starts to happen is there's 2 parts of the brain that really sort of are impacted by insufficient sleep. And one of them is called the prefrontal cortex, which sits sort of in between the bridge of your nose and between your eyes. And that is sort of considered to be like the emotional processing center, the rational part of the brain. And the second part is the emotional center, which is called the amygdala, which is a little bit further back. The amygdala, when we're underslept, the amygdala, it increases its output by 60%. So our emotions start to get a little bit threat, a little bit overhyped, whereas the prefrontal cortex, the things that makes all our rational decisions, that drops its performance level and its output. Therefore, this amygdala is in complete control almost. So therefore, we start to see irrationality, emotional imbalance. We can't concentrate for long periods. So that's why we need to, that's just a little bit into the science as to why we need to improve or maintain our sleep with regards to our mental health. In terms of physical health, sleep affects every single biological process that science has found. There's not one process in our body, blood sugar regulation, digestion, movement, cardiorespiratory output, there is not one process that is not affected by insufficient sleep. For example, if you're underslept by, say we take 7 hours, if you're getting 5 hours sleep a night, which is quite a luxury for some people, there's 2 hormones in your body called ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is essentially a hormone that controls satiety. So you eat some food, you feel full, you feel satisfied by that food. When we're underslept, leptin, which is the opposite hormone, which reduces satiety, goes through the roof. So therefore, when we eat, we don't feel as satisfied by our food when we're underslept. Therefore, we're likely to eat more calories, consume more, and more of the wrong stuff. So that's a really simple thing, which we probably can all relate to, that when we've had really poor sleep, we start making bad choices food-wise. we eat more of the wrong stuff. And the sort of downstream effects of that is blood sugar increases, we start taking more calories, therefore our weight starts to go up, we're less likely to exercise. So there's 3-4 examples of why we should improve or maintain good sleep to essentially control and maximise our physical health. Now, the immune system is quite the topic at the moment with COVID. So sleep will optimise, good sleep optimises the immune system. Sorry, excuse me, staying hydrated. And I just want to reference a study here by a gentleman called Mark Irwin, I think it was in 1994. Essentially, what they proved was that if you're underslept, you have a certain set of white blood cells called natural killer cells. And what they do is they go around searching for infections and literally terminate the infection site, the bacteria, and we stay healthy. When we're underslept, and it's underslept by 3 hours from a recommended sleep time of 7 hours, so if we're getting 4 hours sleep a night, those natural killer cells in the study that we're referring to were shown to reduce their efficiency level and performance level by 72%. 72%. Now that is not 3-4%. 72%. And those cells, those bacteria that we're sort of getting rid of and exterminating with the natural killer cell performance, they're big cells. They're big infectious cells, so they can be tumor-promoting cells. They can be cells that we're looking at with COVID. So if we're not optimizing our sleep levels, our immunity starts to get essentially trashed. So it's absolutely imperative that we get good sleep, good quality sleep, the right amount of time to optimize our immune system. And with what's going on at the moment, there's absolutely no better time to focus on that. So I'm going to give you some tips. 4 ways that we can improve our sleep. So the first one is control our light exposure. So when we talk about light exposure with sleep, everybody's probably thinking now, oh, blue light, looking at your phone in bed. Yes, 100%. We need to basically reduce our blue light exposure, because what that will do, it will interrupt a process, it will interrupt a hormone called melatonin. And what melatonin does, it rises throughout the day and is essentially the body's signal to say it's time to go to sleep. When we consume our phone in our face in bed or before bed, that blue light will essentially stop that melatonin production, because our brain thinks it's daylight, because blue light replicates the light of sunlight. So that's why we need to essentially control blue light in the evening. Also, with light exposure, we need to get more light in the daytime. One of the key things to sleep is a circadian rhythm. What a circadian rhythm is, it's essentially our body clock. It's controlled by something in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN for short. And what that does is, works in tandem with the sun. And it essentially starts as we wake up. So we expose ourselves to bright light. Our body will react accordingly. So it will fire up the right hormone levels. It will fire out cortisol. It will fire out all the things that we need to function optimally for the day. And that affects your sleep at night. So one thing you can do in the morning, if you want to improve your sleep at night, is get as much daylight exposure as you can. And if you're working from home, something as simple as sitting by a window and working, if you can do that, is a brilliant way to maximize your light exposure. And just to sort of bring some science to that, there was a study done and published by Forbes magazine in 2013, by a guy called David Savola. And what he proved was that office workers in New York City, if they were essentially working within 2 feet of a window, they got better sleep, longer sleep, and greater, deeper sleep at night, compared to staff that were working, say, 3, 4, 5 feet away from a window, where there's like almost like a partition wall, or they're working in a meeting room, some form of challenge to the light. So that's really powerful. So yeah, if we can get outside and really get some light exposure or get close to the window, that's a really great way to optimizing that. Second thing is a caffeine curfew. So what a caffeine, I'm not anti-caffeine, by the way, I just want to get that out there before we start. So a caffeine curfew is essentially stop drinking caffeine or consuming caffeine by a certain point. And the reason why I say that is caffeine has a quarter life in the blood. Firstly, caffeine's a drug. So drugs are sort of measured on how effective they are in the bloodstream. Caffeine has a quarter life of 12 hours. So what that means is if you have a cup of coffee at midday and that coffee consumes 100 milligrams of caffeine, by midnight, 25 grams of that coffee can still be swimming around your blood and brain, and around your brain. And what that will do is it will interrupt your deep sleep. Science shows that. There's countless studies that I can reference if people are interested in viewing those at the end, where where they see that caffeine interrupts deep sleep, it reduces sleep time, it reduces sleep onset, and the way that happens is caffeine essentially mimics the compound of caffeine mimics a sleep chemical compound called adenosine, which builds up throughout the day. And what adenosine is, it's almost like a sleep pressure. The more adenosine you have, the more sleepy you get. So caffeine will mimic that and stop adenosine from producing, and it will almost create like a dam effect. And then when we get that caffeine stays there for 12 hours, that adenosine is failing to keep sort of increasing and incrementing. When the caffeine wears off, you get this huge flush of adenosine, and that's sometimes, well, it's commonly known as a caffeine crash. That's sort of the scientific process. So if we could stop drinking coffee or green tea, dark chocolate with certain sensible times, so 12 hours, but that will really you'll really start to feel a benefit in your sleep immediately. And this is literally the day after you will feel benefit. I very often go caffeine free at times. At the moment I'm not, but when I do go caffeine free, I feel the benefits with immediate effect with my sleep. Another thing, get active. So activity we'll cover in a little bit more detail, but activity has been shown to really improve good deep sleep levels, so deep sleep quality, deep sleep quantity. Now, the one thing about activity which I'll caveat here is don't get active too close to bedtime, because if your heart rate is still stoked up from being active, from doing press-ups or burpees or whatever it is you're doing, then that is going to still stimulate hormones like cortisol, like adrenaline, that are going to be still swimming around the body, and it's going to keep the body in the fight or flight state rather than the rest or digest state, which we want to be in for sleep. So getting active is great, and it's great to do it in the day, absolutely, but be mindful when we're doing it at night that we don't do it too close to bed, high intensity work, because as I say, the sort of disruption will continue as your heart rate starts to come down. Last tip for sleep is become mindful. And what that means is, now this might sound a bit woo-woo and a bit out there for people, mindfulness is sort of the new kid on the block, in my opinion, within the health space. What it is, for people that don't know, is it can be just essentially connecting to the present moment, whether that be through meditation, yoga, listening to music. It could just be sitting outside in the peace and quiet, listening to the birds. It could be staring out the window. It could be anything, as long as your thoughts, you're focused on your breath. Now, loads of things like Calm, Headspace, they're two brilliant mainstream apps which have really come to the fore at the moment with what we're going through with COVID. But those types of things have been around for a long, long time. And what I've heard mindfulness described as previously is gym for the mind. And the benefits from a sleep perspective, as mentioned previously, can be realized immediately. Yoga session before bed, you'll feel it straight away that night, you'll sleep better. And really, some really powerful studies around meditation and how meditation has cured insomnia. And these studies are very, very powerful. They're so powerful that the figures and the statistics that they present cannot be ignored, and mindfulness cannot just be considered as woo-woo or something that's a little bit out there. It's real, it works, it's been practiced in Eastern medicines for a long, long time, and we're starting to catch up now in the West. But I would really, really encourage everybody to think about mindfulness. And if it's the apps, Headspace or Mindfulness, you can get 10-day free trials. But they're really, really good, really, really good. Some really good practices where they encourage you to breathe, that you can engage with, and you can do it anywhere. You can do it in the car, you can do it, let's say, at home, face out the window. So something to really consider. So with sleep, I'll just to summarise there's always room for improvement within improving our sleep. I've got a very rigid sleep hygiene routine. I try to follow the same process every night. Good sleep behaviours throughout the day, but I'm always looking for improvement. So I think everybody can improve in some way. So hopefully there's 4 tips there that you can utilise, and you can start to feel benefit from them almost immediately.
Sean, we've got quite a few questions
Okay.
coming in. I realise that there's not much time left, so we can run over if needs be as well. I have let everyone know that we will be sending out the recording to this, so they won't be missing out on anything. So if anyone needs to leave, know that you will get that. But on the questions, do you have any information on whether sleeping late past midnight or early in the morning hours may contribute to a significant risk linking with certain illnesses, including cancer?
Shift work has been, if we're talking about shift work has been classified by the World Health Organization as a possible carcinogen, in that because our circadian rhythms are out of sync, the hormones that should be active when we should be resting are actually not active because we're awake. So there are correlations with shift work and potential links to cancer. In terms of sleeping late, if you've got a sleep pattern where you go to bed at midnight and wake up at 7, if you're getting your 7 hours in, there's no rule of thumb to say if you decide to sleep late and wake up later, that will link to cancer. The stronger links are more when there's actually reduced sleep time, because the natural killer cell output drops significantly, as I mentioned in the immune section. So hopefully that answers that.
Thank you. We've also got a question on hydration and whether drinking something like orange juice is classed as hydration compared to water, but you might be about to cover that.
Yep.
And also a note that most of the attendees today are females. So what do you think about getting more males involved in this sort of arena? How do you think that might work?
Well, I think everybody needs to be aware of the sort of detrimental effects that lack of sleep or insufficient sleep will have. So for me, I'd love to engage in more males. There's a very much machismo mentality around sleep, and with men, we don't really talk about our mental health much. So there's still that little stigma around it. But as I said, there's a machismo attitude especially in the corporate world, where I can get by on 4 hours sleep, I can get by on 5 hours sleep. And if we think about Margaret Thatcher, for example, I can really go into some detail here, but I'll try to stay out of that. But Margaret Thatcher was one of those people that said she got by on 4 hours sleep. There's very, very strong links now with lack of sleep and dementia and Alzheimer's. And she's evidence of that. She died really young from a prime minister, whatever it was, mid-60s, from Alzheimer's. And she was one of those figureheads that was championing lack of sleep. So that's the bravado element. There shouldn't be a bravado element. I would love to engage in more males. How we do that, I don't know. I guess it's a challenge to reduce that stigma, but we'll keep trying, I guess.
Thanks, Sean. One for us to think about, maybe.
Yep. Okay, should we skip into hydration? Yep, so recommended levels of water. So just to acknowledge the question, orange juice is considered something that will hydrate you because it's a liquid, it's a fluid. What we've got to consider about orange juice is the high level of sugar. Because when fruits are in their whole form, they can carry a considerable amount of fibre with them. So therefore, the sugar that is released is part released in tandem with the fibre. Therefore, there isn't the drastic impact on our blood sugar. Whereas when we blend it and it becomes orange juice, the fibre disappears and the sugar increases. So I would recommend fruit. I wouldn't personally have lots of fruit juice, but it's certainly a source of hydration. So the recommended levels, we'll crack on with this now. So the recommended levels of water for an average adult are 1.8 to 2 litres a day. So that will be variable depending on your activity level, the weather, all types of little different things, what you ate last night, all sorts of things. So what we want to do is why do we need to improve our hydration, first of all, in the context of being in isolation? Firstly, hydration, it maintains cognitive function. I think a lot of people could probably relate to this, where they've been sat at the desk or they've been sat working and they're really entrenched in the work. They've realised that they've only drank half a litre of water throughout the day, and the concentration starts to go, you start to feel fatigued. You get distracted very easily, your focus level drops down, and that happens. The brain is 75% water, so it has a fuel source, it needs a fuel source, it needs a hydration source. So a 1% drop in hydration can really start to lead to some significant cognitive impairment. And when I was, just back to relate, when I was working within sport, hydration was one of the critical things that we focused on. A, for weight loss, because you would sweat a lot during performance and then replenishing, but also prior to competition, you had to be ultimately hydrated for that cognitive function, to make sure that we were optimally fueled, essentially. So another thing about hydration within lockdown, I guess, or within isolation or remote working, is it controls hunger. So many people that I've delivered this to have always fed back to me on this point is, you're right, I always felt like I was hungry, but I was just thirsty. And it's true. There's a part of our brain called the hypothalamus, and that is sort of the hunger, thirst sensation control center. So when that is dehydrated, it essentially thinks that we're hungry. So it's absolutely imperative that we keep our hydration levels up to make sure that brain function is maintained and is optimal. Therefore, we're not over-consuming calories that we don't need to, and excessive the weight gain, the blood sugar. One other thing, for hydration, regulates body temperature. So fortunately, we've got some good weather at the moment. We don't really get this in the northwest a lot, so we're really appreciating it. So, but when we get outside, and if we are exercising outside, we're going for a run on our hour or whatever it may be, it's imperative that we can take in water, take in fluids to regulate our body temperature. There's a risk that you can overheat. If you're not replenishing, if you sweat, you've got to replace that fluid, because there could be further consequences downstream in terms of weight and metabolism and heart rate and that sort of stuff. So it's really, really important that we hydrate to regulate body temperature. So 4 quick tips. Keep a water bottle to hand, and just to prove that I practice what I preach, there's my water bottle. Keep a water bottle to hand, keep sipping it throughout the day, keep it topped up. Really good way to maintain your hydration and keep them optimal. Drink water with every meal. Something I took on as a New Year's resolution, actually, was to drink water with every meal, to really get a better taste of the food. And it really helps, actually. If you've got one of those at breakfast, one of those at lunch, one of those at dinner, there's your 2 litres done without even having to think about it. So really good, easy tip to utilise. Increase your fruit and veg. So fruit and vegetables are a potent source of hydration. So for example, a tomato is 97% water. So if you can increase our fruit and veg, not only do we get hydrated, we also get loads of phytonutrients, we get the fibre, we get the vitamins and minerals as part of that. So there's almost like a double, triple, quadruple whammy by increasing our fruit and vegetables. So really, really easy thing to do. And what I would say is, although caffeinated drinks are considered a source of hydration, because they're a diuretic, drinking coffee will essentially will pass water a lot quicker. Therefore, it's key that we don't drink too much caffeinated drink, because we will pass water. If we don't replenish that water, we'll start to see dehydration increase. So 4 really good ways to get our hydration levels up. So I'm just going to plug my charger in, just 1 second. Apologies for this. Before we move on to nutrition. Any questions on hydration, Bryony? Any more?
No real questions. Someone has mentioned that they watched a scientific TV program, and milk was proved the best to provide the best hydration from memory due to the processing rate of hormones and absorption.
I don't know. I can't really answer that because I'm not aware of that. But I'd love to see that research. So if someone could send that to me, I'd be really interested to find that. For me, in my experience, water is what I've always been advised by specialists, people in the sports world, and water is what I would always sort of promote. I mean, we could have allergy issues with milk, so I like to stay away from that. But yeah, I'd love to see that research. That'd be really interesting. So we'll move into nutrition now, and the current nutrition challenges that we've got, I guess, are probably, for me personally, I've never really experienced anything like this now, where we were struggling to get food. Pasta was like gold; you couldn't get it from anywhere. It was tough to get into the shops. You had to keep 2 meters apart. All that sort of stuff was really, I was finding it quite difficult because for my family, we do an online shop. We couldn't get an online order. When the online order was turning up, half the stuff was missing. So we had to be really vigilant with our meal planning and meal structure and what we're consuming. So I think it's a great opportunity now to really sort of hone in and focus on what we're eating, why we're eating it. So why do we need to improve nutrition with regards to being in lockdown or working remotely? Well, firstly, we've got to control our caloric intake. So we're less active because of the situation we find ourselves in. So therefore, so we don't gain weight and our blood sugar doesn't start getting a little bit out of control. It's really important that we control our caloric intake. So we don't want to increase weight. We don't want any more sort of health pressure on ourselves. So if we can control our caloric intake by being careful with what we eat, being selective with our foods, then we can sort of stave away from that rapid weight gain, which can happen. We want greater energy. So in terms of energy, food is our fuel. Without a shadow of a doubt, it is unarguable. Food is our fuel. And I think I come across people a lot when I talk about nutrition and we get into debates about nutrition, and food is sort of seen as not fuel. It's sort of seen as just something that we do. But it's absolutely our fuel. And I gave the analogy before about 4-star in the Ferrari, but you wouldn't put diesel in a petrol engine. Therefore, we shouldn't fuel our bodies with inappropriate carbohydrates, for example, donuts or high sugar processed foods. So if we want to be at our optimum levels of output, we need to make sure that we're putting the optimum stuff in. And also back to optimizing immunity. So food, on my website, I try to get a couple of blogs out a week, or I try to sort of factor in around COVID and the situation we find ourselves in. And I think one of the things that the government has missed, and they've probably not covered it because it's quite a debatable area, is the way food can optimise immunity. Now, bright coloured foods, such as red peppers, for example, will contain loads of vitamins and minerals, and phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are just plant chemicals. So, but we're not being told what to eat. We're not being told how that can affect our health and prevent certain things. There's a lot of research that is starting to come to the fore around vitamin D and how vitamin D is playing a key role in the prevention of COVID-19 and the bacteria infection that we get. But in terms of minerals and vitamins, for example, let's go back to our mental health. Spinach contains a lot of magnesium. Magnesium is great for our mental health. It goes through a set of enzymatic processes and it inhibits our central nervous system and brings a calming effect. So if we can just up our spinach levels, if people may like spinach, they may not, but we can start including it within our dishes, within our meals. That's a really simple way of starting to just put in extra building blocks in getting a greater level of immunity. So there's other things like legumes and beans contain lots of zinc, which is a mineral that it optimizes cell signaling. So what that means is white blood cells get to the site of infection and do their job and get rid of the infection quicker. So there are lots of things in food and nutrition especially that can really put us in good stead to essentially be the best version of ourselves as we can. So 4 tips. Remove processed or refined foods from your diet. So processed foods, they essentially promote inflammation. The things that like additives, E numbers, all that sort of stuff, the chemicals that preserve food and give it its shelf life, they're no good for us. I've always been told a little simple analogy, and that is if it's not seen the sun, do not eat it. So, or if it's not flew, swam, or grew, don't eat it. Two little things that I tend to go by, and things that have got an ingredients list of more than 5 ingredients. For me, I stay well away from, because they don't do anything for my body. The process, the additives, all the chemicals that get added, they do nothing for us. They promote inflammation. They don't really promote good energy. The sugar levels are high, the salt levels are high, and they're just no good. So if we can remove processed or refined foods and replace that with whole foods, then we'll be in a better place. So next one is whole grains. So whole grains are like brown pasta, brown rice, that sort of thing, sweet potatoes. And I sort of tend to go along with the approach and try to advise people that swap whole grains, swap your white pasta, your white carbs for brown versions, simply because they contain more fibre. How that benefits us is that the fibre will essentially, as the carbohydrate is being broke down and turned into glucose, and as it starts entering our blood sugar, that process is a lot slower because of the added fibre. So therefore, we don't get this almost carpet bomb of blood sugar rises because we've eaten a much more simple carbohydrate. The whole grains are much more complex and much more beneficial to our blood sugar and our energy levels. Fruit and veg, talked about it before. We've all heard about fruit and veg and get our 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 a day. I absolutely champion that idea. If you can just increase your fruit and veg intake with every single meal, so for example, add berries to your breakfast, if you have porridge, get some spinach into your sandwich if you're having a brown bread sandwich, whatever it may look like. But if you can find a way to increase your fruit and veg intake, you will really give yourself the best opportunity you can be at staying well and maintaining your well-being. Something that I like to challenge people with, and I do this with my children as well, is create the rainbow. And what that means is just simply get as many colours onto your plate as you can. So yellow peppers, red tomatoes, green cucumber, red onions, black olives, orange carrots. So there's 6 things that you can get in that start to give that rainbow effect. It looks nice, it gets people engaged, but it's also doing really good things for your body. So that is a really, really simple thing to do. And the last thing is being mindful with your food choices. As I mentioned at the outset of this slide, we've got a real challenge on our hands, nutrition at the moment. Certain produce is unavailable. So if you can start planning ahead, what you're going to buy and what you're going to purchase and what you're going to cook, that's a really easy thing to do. Meal planning is a really good tool. But also, mindful being, if you are meal planning, I'm pretty sure you won't plan in for go and open the bag of Oreos in the cupboard. So just being clever and maybe swap the Oreos for some almonds or some type of nuts or some type of dried fruit is a really good way to sort of start shifting that balance from sort of irrational choice to a rational choice. And if we can get there, again, that's a slow process, but if we can get there, it will really, really pay dividends in the short and long term. So just to summarise with nutrition before we get onto the questions, it plays a big, big role in our immunity. Hippocrates said it himself, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So I think that's a really great way to finish this slide. So if there's any questions, Bryony, just fire them out.
There are quite a few questions. Would you rather I leave them to the end and cover activity first, or ask
yeah, well, we can do that. That's absolutely fine.
Just thinking about time.
Yeah, okay. So I'll try and whiz through this quite quickly. So activity. This isn't running a marathon. This is just basically getting a little bit more active. And as mentioned before, the activity challenges, the activity restrictions are so apparent now. Never in my lifetime, and pretty much everyone on the call, as we've been in this situation. Gyms are closed, sport is literally written off, classes are cancelled, all that sort of stuff, and it is really, really challenging. So we've really, really faced with probably our greatest ever limitation to our exercise. So why do we need to improve or maintain our activity levels? Well, it sustains and improves our mental and physical well-being. From a mental health perspective, activity stimulates loads of endorphins. Hopefully people have heard of the term runner's high, that it's essentially how you feel after you've done exercise. It just shows the endorphins are really sort of getting into the brain, making us feel just a lot more alive, essentially, and a lot more confident. Our mood improves. But also there's a lot of research in a particular protein at the moment called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that is really, really upregulated when we exercise. And what that does, it starts to stimulate the brain in really powerful ways, in that we feel better, we feel more confident, our focus improves, our ability to concentrate improves, our attention span improves. It really does have some profound effects. So really key thing, burn caloric energy. So as mentioned before, we're working remotely, we're in isolation, our activity levels are down, and probably our caloric intake is probably up. So if we can stay active in whatever form that looks like, walking, running, doing the stairs, doing PE with Joe Wicks in the morning, whatever that may look like, we're burning those calories, we're offsetting that additional intake of food that we're potentially putting ourselves under. And also, one of the things that gets sort of missed a little bit with home working and remote working and being in isolation is we've now got a complete sense of sedentary behaviour. We are sedentary, and sedentary behaviour is now starting to come to the fore in terms of its health risks. There's one study, and I think it was by the World Health Organization that released this data, is that sedentary behaviour long term can be as essentially detrimental to your health as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. So that is powerful. So we need to get off. We need to really, really be mindful of that sedentary behaviour. Sitting for long periods, we can have little breaks, get up and get moving. That's really, really good for our health. If anyone's got smart devices like watches or stuff like that, there's great things on there that can sort of trigger you to move and remind you to move, which are really useful. So 4 immediate ways to increase activity levels. I don't know if anybody's noticed that if you have a commute within your workday, you've now not got that, or you may not have that. And I don't think people really value or appreciate the value of what a commute does. It allows you to decongest the day, process everything that's gone on before you get into the home life. If you've got young children, you start the bedtime routine. Right now, when you're working from home, my commute is from my my lounge door to my hallway. So it's about 4 steps. And there's none of that down processing time, that relaxed time where I can process the day. So if you can sort of break up your work day, maybe if you finish at 4 or 5, take an hour of exercise then that can really sort of allow that processing to go on and really digest the day. All the thoughts that you've been having, get them out your system, get ready for the evening routine, get ready for your home life. And that's been really useful with some of the mental health work that I do. Is a really good piece of advice that people have been utilising and really championing benefit from. So really great tip. So another thing, free home workouts that are equipment free. On my website, I've published a couple of home workouts that I've done that have got a advanced level, intermediate level, and a lower level if you can't do certain things. All body weight based, no equipment. There's millions of things on YouTube. I think PE with Joe Wicks has been fantastic. Again, no equipment needed. Something that I would really, really encourage people to embrace. One other thing, take activity breaks during the workday. Because we're remote working, that doesn't mean that we have to be entrenched within our laptop from 9 till 5 or whatever our working day may look like. Take a break. If you've got a garden, get out there and go and walk in it. Walk around the house if you've got that. Start doing some stretching, which is really good for our posture, which I'll come on to a little bit later. But activity breaks, it's imperative. There's no way that we can concentrate from 9 till 5 at 100%. Absolutely no way. It's just not physically possible. With all the influx of noise, phones going off, it just doesn't happen. So taking an activity break gets you to essentially break away from that sort of sympathetic nerve, that parasympathetic nervous state we're in, the fight or flight situation, because we're constantly reacting, and it just alleviates that stress. So taking an activity break, really, really good tip. And this is something else I've been doing, is getting active while making dinner. So if I've had a day where I've been ultra busy, I've been trying to do a bit of the homeschooling with the children, which sometimes goes well, sometimes it doesn't. I've not had the chance to get active. What I'll do is I'll put the dinner in the oven, whatever we're having, and I'll start, if it's in 30 minutes, I'll do 30 minutes of activity or 25 minutes of activity while it's cooking. I'll find a pocket of time to try and get active. And that activity could just be, as I say, a bodyweight circuit. It could be 30 minutes of yoga. Something that I'd really encourage people to look at is on YouTube is something called Yoga with Adrienne, it's free, completely free, brilliant yoga teacher. Some of the best stuff I've done, and I've done yoga for quite a long time. But there's all sorts of different ways about getting active while making dinner. Get dancing or get creative. There's lots of great things we can do. So to summarise, we've talked about sleep, we've talked about hydration, we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about activity. We've given some tips within that. If possible, try and create routines and start to build on already existing habits. If you do something in the morning, try to build a habit onto it. So if we're having breakfast, can we get some fruit in our breakfast? Really simple way of doing it is build your new activity onto an already existing routine. A lot of evidence to suggest that that's how habits and structures are formed and routines are formed. If you can involve others, make it fun. That's always a good way to be accountable to someone. So if you've got a partner, try to be accountable to them and get them engaged and get them involved, and get creative. If you can get creative with what you're doing with your food, i.e. taste the rainbow, please try to do that.